My name is Ryker. I'm 19. And this happened about a year ago, so I don't live in Vancouver anymore. At the time, I shared a small, run-down apartment with my roommate, Ellie. It was one of those old buildings, the kind with long, narrow hallways that always smelled faintly of dust and damp wool. The walls were pepper-thin. You could hear your neighbors arguing, their TVs, their alarms in the morning. It was just a fact of life there. The lights in the hallway flickered more often than not, casting these long, dancing shadows, and there were no security cameras. Not a single one. It was the kind of place you didn't think about too much, because if you did, you'd start to feel uneasy. Sounds traveled weirdly in that building, especially at night. A door closing 3 floors down could sound like it was right next to you. It was just creaky and old. My roommate, Ellie, was 20. She was super social, always out with friends. But she had this one weird quirk. She was terrified of being alone at night. Absolutely petrified. It never made much sense to me, given how outgoing she was. I worked late shifts at a restaurant downtown, so I was often coming home after midnight, sometimes even later. She'd always leave a light on for me in the living room. There was some talk among the other tenants, little whispers in the laundry room or by the mailboxes. People complaining about noise, not parties or loud music, but strange noises at night. Scuffling, dragging sounds. No one could ever pinpoint where it was coming from. We all just assumed it was the building's old pipes or rats in the walls. We should have paid more attention. It was a Tuesday night in October. I remember because the air was getting that cold, wet bite to Italiano. My shift ran late, and I didn't get home until almost 2 in the morning. I was exhausted, just wanting to fall into bed. I unlocked the door, and the first thing I saw was Ellie. She wasn't in her room. She was sitting on the floor in the living room, in the dark, with her knees pulled up to her chest. The only light was the dim orange glow from the street lamp outside the window. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Her eyes were wide. I asked her what was wrong, why she was sitting in the dark. She just put a finger to her lips. She looked genuinely terrified. After a few seconds of dead silence, she whispered, "He's been out there for an hour." "Who's been out there?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper back. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. Footsteps in the hallway, going back and forth. I listened. I didn't hear anything, just the usual groan of the building, the hum of the refrigerator. I told her it was probably just Mr. Henderson from 4B coming home drunk again. But she shook her head. "No," she whispered. "It's different. It's slow. He walks to our door, and he just stops. And he stands there. Then he walks away, and then he comes back." I walked over to the peephole, my heart starting to beat a little faster. The hallway was dark. Just the one flickering bulb at the far end. I couldn't see anything. I stood there, listening, for what felt like an eternity. Nothing. I was about to tell Ellie she was just spooked when I heard it. It started faintly, from down the hall. A slow shuffle. Not a normal walk. It was uneven, like one foot was dragging. Scrape. Step. Scrape. Step. It was a sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. It was methodical. Unhurried. The sound got closer, louder, until it was right outside our door. And then it stopped. Silence. Complete and total silence. We were both frozen. I could hear my own breathing, loud and ragged in my ears. I could hear Ellie's, a choked little gasp. Through the wood of the door, I thought I heard something else. A soft, wet sound, like someone breathing, but with a thick, congested chest. We stood there, not moving a muscle, for maybe a full minute. Then, the scraping sound started again, moving away, back down the hall, until it faded into nothing. Ellie let out a sob she'd been holding in. "He knows we're here," she whispered, her face pale in the gloom. "He knows we're awake. He's waiting." And then the footsteps came back. We didn't move from the living room. We just sat there, on the floor, in the dark, listening. The footsteps would approach, stop at our door, wait, and then retreat. over and over. It was a kind of psychological torture. Each time the silence fell, the tension was unbearable. My mind was racing. Should I call the police? What would I say? I hear footsteps. They'd think I was crazy. Should I swing the door open? Scream. But a paralyzing fear kept me rooted to the spot. It felt like if we made a single sound, we'd be acknowledging him, inviting him in. After maybe the 10th time he stopped at the door, the silence stretched longer. I was pressed against the door now, straining to hear. Ellie was behind me, her hands gripping my shirt. This time was different. We didn't hear him walk away. We just heard presence, the feeling of someone standing right on the other side of that thin piece of wood. Then, a soft, dull thud against the door, like someone had leaned their whole body weight against it. The old wood creaked. The doorknob didn't turn, but we saw it jiggle, just a tiny, metallic twitch. We both held our breath. I thought my heart was going to explode, and then came the worst sound of all. A slow, deliberate scrape. Not a shoe this time. It was a high-pitched, grating sound. Like fingernails, long fingernails, being dragged slowly, deliberately, down the front of our door. From top to bottom, it was a possessive sound, a sound that said, I was here. We didn't sleep. We stayed on the floor, huddled together, until the first gray light of dawn started to filter through the window. The sounds had stopped hours ago, but the fear hadn't. It was thick in the air, a physical thing. When the sun was fully up, and we could hear the sounds of the city waking up, sirens, people leaving for work, the spell finally broke. I stood up, my legs stiff and sore. I had to know. I had to see. Ellie begged me not to open the door, but I had to. I took a deep breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and pulled the door inward, just a crack at first. The hallway was empty. The flickering light was off. Everything looked normal, except for two things. The first was on our door. Running from the top to the bottom was a long, deep scratch. It wasn't a mark from a key or a casual scrape. It was gouged into the wood, splintered and raw. It was undeniably intentional. The second thing was on the floor, placed perfectly in the center of our doormat. It was a single Polaroid photograph. My hand was shaking as I bent down to pick it up. The photo was still developing, the image slowly blooming into view. It was a picture of our apartment door. From the hallway, the angle was low, like it was taken by someone crouching. And the lighting, it was dark. The only illumination was the faint, ghostly glow from the numbers on our door and the flickering bulb down the hall. Someone had stood out there, in the dark, for long enough to take a picture. They had stood right there, while we were inside, paralyzed with fear. We called the police. They were sympathetic, but there was nothing they could do. No cameras, no witnesses. None of the neighbors heard a thing, or at least, none of them would admit it. The scratch on the door. Vandalism. The photo. Probably a prank, but we knew it wasn't. We were out of that apartment in less than a week. We broke the lease, lost our deposit, and I never looked back. I moved out of the city shortly after. The building is still there. I looked it up online once. They never installed security cameras. The story should end there, but it doesn't. Not really. Because sometimes, even now, in my new apartment hundreds of miles away, I'll wake up in the middle of the night. For no reason. And in the suffocating silence, I'll hear it. Faintly, a slow, uneven shuffle. Footsteps that stopped just outside my door.